This video is connected to the November 13th class where we're learning about advanced techniques in raster. And it'll close out our sort of three-part section on LiDAR, which, if you'll recall from the previous videos, is really where you've taken a series of what are called LiDAR point clouds, which are thousands upon millions of points that you've dotted all over the Earth. And they define the shape and the contours of topography. And from that, you can then, like we did last video, turn them into elevation rasters. We created two here that I've since renamed. One that's surface, which is just the ground elevation, and the other here that's terrain. Now, the reason and the way I've sort of colored that up, and you can do the same, right, is if you click on any of the rasters and come up to appearance, go to symbology and pick stretch, you'll get something like this. And you can pick sort of the color scheme that you'll stretch between, right? So I think the black and white works for topography, but I like sort of picking a different color for the ground surface. And I'm not going to do much here in this video because, these are more advanced topics for how to process raster. But I do want to show you that once you have elevation grids here, you can do some basic stuff like we did last video, or last class where we did raster calculator, just called out maybe how high or how low something was, elevations above or below a certain point. But if you come into analysis and then go to tools, there's actually a lot of cool tools under spatial analyst and surface that let you take topography, right? Elevation or terrain, elevation plus buildings and shape, and model some really cool things. You can calculate the direction of slope. You could do visibility, meaning what can I see and what can see me. You can calculate the slope of something. Too advanced for now, but there's even a tool up here in hydrology where you can calculate the direction that water would flow during a storm, right? So you could see where the stream networks would be or what areas would flood. But let me just show you a couple of these because they're pretty cool, and they create these cool visual rasters that you can then display when you're trying to identify and organize your topography or sort of visualize trends for, a client or a teacher or sort of your audience. So I'll show you slope and then I'll show you visibility. I think those are just sort of two cool ones to check out. So if you go to slope, slope's going to want a surface. So the first thing it's going to want is a surface rat. Oh dear. What did I do, Shay? What did you do? So drag in surface raster. Maybe I'll give it a name here. I'll call it slope. And really all it's going to want to know is degree or percent, right? So degree will tell you a slope anywhere between 0 and sort of 90. And then percent rise, is effectively, is it 10% more, 15%, 20%? Right? So either one would kind of work, but let's do percent rise. Tends to be sort of a little bit easier to visualize. And we'll run it. And what's going to come back is a different grid. Now every pixel is no longer going to tell us its elevation. It's going to tell us its percent rise from the pixel next to it, right? So that's what you'll now see. We've now moved away from something telling us, and let's give it a second to load, its elevation and telling us I'm less than 3%, right? I'm 6%, I'm 10%, I'm 15%, I'm 20%, right? And so we can start to see where the areas that have higher degrees of slope are, right? A super cool, useful tool to revisualize and understand your space. Even cooler, and one of my all-time favorite tools is one called visibility. And I'll only run through it quick. There is a ton you can do with visibility, but I'll show you the basics. And those who like it can keep going. Visibility means what can I see and what can be seen. So it is far better used with a terrain model. If you remember from the previous LiDAR video, the terrain model is what we created when we used all points, when we let the buildings and the trees and all sort of the shapes on the Earth be modeled. If you drag that in, and then the main other thing it's going to want to know is what's called point or polyline observers. Imagine this as like where you want to be looking from. Maybe it's a tower you want to build or where you're going to be standing, and it's from these points or point that you create that your map is going to tell you what you can see and what can see you. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this little doohickey here where I don't need to load anything and actually draw it. I'm going to go to points. It'll take a second. It'll sort of load me what a point might look like. And I'm going to try to sort of put it, if you can see this kind of building here that I think is high, I'm going to try to put it here, so I'm like imagining I'm standing on top of that building. Maybe I'm going to put a telescope here, a cell phone receiver tower, and I want to get a sense of like what it's going to be able to see and what it's going to be able to connect with. So I've put it there, got my visibility, got my raster, and let's just keep it frequency. A lot of cool stuff you could do that we're not going to get into. You could change this from frequency to observers. Frequency will just really give you a like I can be seen or I can't be seen. Observers is when you have many, many points, and it'll sort of tell you which observers, which towers, which people can be seen or not seen. The other thing for you to do yourself is what are called the observer parameters. I would just recommend after watching this video, if you like this, to click on the information. It'll tell you more. But these are things that you would do to this actual point to sort of change it, right? So maybe what you want to say is that, this point is going to be on top of a building or maybe on top of the ground, but it's actually offset, right? It's a tower, so it should be 100 feet sort of above that. You know what I'm saying? Or maybe what we want to say here is a surface offset. We want to imagine that this thing is 100 feet high, and it needs to connect with another tower that's 100 feet high, so we want to raise sort of the surface up 100 feet everywhere else. Maybe I only want to look a certain distance, so I have radius. Maybe I want an angle, right? It can only look in a 90-degree direction. There's a lot of cool things you can do to mess with this observer or observers, but let's keep it super simple right now. We got our terrain. We put a random point on this building. I've said frequency. And what I'm going to do is run, and I'm going to come back with a cool graphic that is literally going to tell me if I'm standing here or something's there, where is it visible? Where can it be seen? And where can it not be seen? A ton, like I said, you can do to advance this tool. But even in its most basic, it is a neat tool. And there you have it as one. Everything in red is what you're going to be able to see or what can be seen from this area given the tool around it. Maybe I should have changed it a little and pretended like it wasn't flat on the roof, that it was like 6 feet tall, given it an observer offset. Maybe I'll even play with that here. If you come to this observer offset, the vertical distance that's added to the observer elevation. Let's maybe pretend even this is like a 10-foot tower that I'd climb. So not only am I now on top of this building, but I'm on a 10-foot tower. I'll say 10 feet. And so I'll turn that off. Oh, maybe not 10 feet. That might be too long. Raster sometimes trips itself up. Yeah, I'll just delete it all and I'll say, 10 feet. And so I'm observer offset 10, same thing, and I'm going to run it. Oh, doesn't like my name 10 feet. Oh, maybe you can't start or add a space. Feet 10. Let's see that. Maybe you can't start with a number. I've learned that in the past. There we go. Feet 10, and it's going to run. I've turned the other one off. Again, it's the same type of analysis it's going to do in a second, but it's now going to sort of have, imagining that this point, this observer, was 10 feet off the ground. And if it were 10 feet off the ground, right, if it weren't laying flat, you could see more, right? So what a killer tool. Take topography, take the world, and actually model what can see. Where are the buildings' view sheds? Where can two things connect to one another based on the topography? An awesome visual tool to have that is all made possible because of LiDAR. So again, a ton you can do with LiDAR, a ton you can do with surface. A lot of that is stuff that Dana and others will follow up on the deeper raster class. But I want you to know what LiDAR is, how to get it, how to play with it, and at least have some basic understanding of the types of analytics you can do with it.